I've always been a little bit absent-minded about things, but I'm finding as I'm getting a little bit older, I'm getting more absent-minded. Last week, for 3 days, I could not find my glasses. Now, the reason for that is I have 2 pair of glasses. I thought I'd be smart this last time I got glasses. The bifocals that I got last time just weren't cutting it. And I thought, hey, I can get 2 pair of glasses for $99 or something, I think, whatever the deal was at one of these places. So I thought, I will get 1 pair of reading glasses, and I will get 1 pair to wear all the time. The problem is I have to take those things off all the time, and I'll lay them down, and then I can't find them. Well, I looked at what I thought was every place. I looked here all over. I thought, well, maybe I left them down in the classroom Tuesday or Wednesday night. Nope, they weren't there. I thought, well, maybe for some reason I took them off in the bathroom. So I checked every bathroom in this place that I use, and they weren't there. I looked in my car. I looked in our van. I couldn't find them anyplace. I was getting very upset and annoyed by this. And then I happened to be out in the backyard, and sitting there in our little gazebo thing that we have, on the side table by where I sat were my glasses. I was relieved. I felt good about that. The problem is, it took me 3.5 days to find them. And it was hard doing some things that I needed my glasses for. It reminds me in a way of a story I heard of a man who was out under a street light one night looking around, and the local preacher stops by and sees him, and he knows him, and he says, "Frank," he said, "what are you doing?" He said, "Well, I lost my wallet." He said, "Well, let me help you look for it." So they look all over, they look every place around there, and it's really getting dark now, and they haven't found it. And he said, "Frank, are you sure this is where you lost it?" He said, "Oh, I didn't lose it here." He says, "Well, Frank, why are you looking here?" He says, "Because where I lost it, there's no light." Some of us go through life that way. We look for things that we've lost. We look for things that we want, that we need, that's going to fulfill our lives and take care of our problems. The problem is we're looking in the wrong place. We look at the places that are more familiar to us. We look at the places that may have a little more light, a little more people, a little more atmosphere, and we just keep looking, and we never find. How do you react when you lose something? Do you search, or do you just give up? Many of you, it depends on what you lose. When we had our kids and Ross was just little, we went into a Lowe's or a DIY, and I remember that day very clearly. We were in there, Lisa and I, looking at Oriental rugs, and Ross disappeared. The fear that I had not being able to find him. Today, if I were to lose him, I wouldn't panic. Why? Not because I love him less. It's not because I would like to lose him. Those aren't the reasons. The reasons are because he's more mature. He knows where he's going. He knows what he's doing. There's going to come a day that we're going to be in Lowe's, and he's going to lose me. And I hope he looks for me and doesn't just let me wander aimlessly till the store closes. We know that something in our lives is missing. We just don't know what it is sometimes. We may or may not know what is missing, but we spend time trying to find something to fill the void. Solomon writes a book called Ecclesiastes that we're going to be looking at for the next few weeks. in this sermon series that I've entitled Christmas in July. Because I called it this because just like Christmas, there's a season that we enjoy, and there's a season for everything. So we're going to be talking about the seasons of life. And today we're going to be examining a time in life that Solomon talks about here in the first chapter of Ecclesiastes, as we look at a season for searching. Solomon writes about this, and he searches all things under the sun to find value to his life. He looks at everything, he takes inventory, and he comes to a conclusion, which is kind of depressing. He says, all is meaningless. Well, I'm going to leave you with that note. Let's go home and cry in our pillows now. Life is meaningless. He goes and says that the things in this life don't mean a whole lot. That the things in this life that we look for, that we search for, doesn't do us a whole lot of good. There's more to life than the things around us. And we're going to go on this search together today, looking at what Solomon finds in his search and how it applies to our lives today. First of all, we see that he tells us that life feels meaningless. In Ecclesiastes 1:2, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. I find it interesting that when Solomon starts writing Ecclesiastes and he gets into this search, he doesn't go at it real easy. He doesn't beat around the bush. He just throws it out there right off the bat. I've looked every place. I've examined all types of things in this life. And no matter how much importance you put on it, no matter how much you want it, once you get it, you're going to find out it's meaningless. It's meaningless. Now, that's kind of a negative way of looking at things. It's a sad way of looking at things. Mark Twain, the humorist of the 19th century and writer, he expressed thoughts about the meaninglessness of life in views of man's inevitable death. Shortly before his own death, he wrote these words: "A myriad of men are born, they labor and sweat and struggle, they squabble and scold and fight, they scramble for little mean advantages over each other. Age creeps up on them, infirmities follow. Those they love are taken from them, and the joy of life is turned to aching grief. The release comes at the last, the only unpoisoned gift earth ever had for them, and they vanish from a world where they were of no consequence, a world which will lament them a day and forget about them forever." Now, some of the stuff that Twain writes, he says tongue-in-cheek, but some of what he says is true. All the things that we hold on to so dearly and so tightly in this life that we feel that we can't let go of, according to Solomon's, meaningless. You know, we work so hard to accumulate so much to impress people we don't like. And our philosophy is oftentimes, he who dies with the most toys wins. No. He who dies with the most toys is still dead. It doesn't matter. It's meaningless. We put our emphasis on the wrong thing so often, and Solomon wants us to know that. And it sounds pretty harsh, but I think Solomon wants us to to really listen to what he has to say by starting out in this way. As we read on in verses 3 through 8, he tells us that life feels tiring. It's tiring. Beginning with verse 3. What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises, the sun sets, and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. All things are weariness, more than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. Now, I was talking with Jerry Flower this morning and Denise, and they're traveling all over the place. And I think that's great. Enjoy it. Enjoy all the beauty of God's world and seeing all of these things. But according to what Solomon says, we can't get enough. We always want to see a little bit more. We want to hear a little bit more of the beauty here on earth. We want to experience it all. And Solomon is saying here, even with that, life can seem trying. I know from traveling and vacationing that you can make some beautiful memories. But I also know that it seems like you go on a 2-week vacation, and that 2 weeks of vacation go a whole lot faster than 2 weeks of work. Unless you're spending it with your mother-in-law. And then it's an eternity. For some people, I wouldn't know what that's like. But life can be tiring. Even when you're on vacation, you're enjoying everything. Don't you find yourself after a few days of that feeling a little weary, a little tired? Because you're trying to cram so much into the day. You're trying to see so much, experience so much. You spend all this money out. You want to get the bang for your buck, right? Too many times we go on vacations, and when we come back, we need another week's vacation to recuperate because we are so active and so busy during that time. Life can feel like that. We want to try to squeeze as much into it as possible. Experience all there is to experience. But Solomon tells us that we're going to feel in life like we're spinning our wheels. Like we are just spinning in circles as the earth spins on its axis. The sun rises and sets, but returns quickly to rise again. Can you believe that it's July already this year? When I was a kid, I thought the year 2020 was like we'd be flying around in cars like the Jetsons by then. And that it just seemed so far away. It's less than 6 months away. 2020. I can't believe it. They say the older you get, the faster time goes. Well, at this rate, I'm going to be laying on my deathbed at age 80 a week from tomorrow, as fast as time's going. But yet we get tired. Life can be very tiring. That can happen in our work. It can happen in our homes. It can happen here at the church. I am so glad we have junior church here for our kids. Because I remember growing up and having to sit and listen to the preacher preach. It was tiring. It's like the story I heard about the little girl. They didn't have a junior church, and she was sitting with her mom, and she was about 5 or 6 years old. And the preacher just went on and on and on. And he didn't tell funny stories. He didn't tell jokes. He just on and on. And this little girl was getting anxious, and she looked at her mommy, and she says, "Mommy, If we give him the money right now for offering, do you think he'll let us go? Sometimes we feel like that. Life's tiring. Even in the things we enjoy, it can become very tedious. Number 3, life feels unsatisfying. Solomon says in the last part of verse 8 through 10, the eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? It was there already. Long ago, it was here before our time. People are looking for something new, something improved, something more exciting in life. Why do you think people go out and buy all the newest gadgets that come out? I saw something today that impressed me beyond measure. It reminded me of back when I was a kid watching some of the sci-fi shows, or watching some of the shows like Get Smart with all the gadgets where he could talk into his phone. Patty's got one of these things. She has a watch, and as I'm walking down here, she's looking at her watch, and I'm thinking, boy, am I running that late getting started? And I said, I'm getting started. She said, oh, no, I'm not worried about that. I said, well, what? I said, I'm texting Justin. And I'm like, 20-some letters in the alphabet on a little pad. How do you get your fingers on it? Oh, you don't do that. You push a button and you talk into it. And it records it and sends it out. Who'd have thunk? It's amazing. And you see something like that, and now I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, I got to get me one of those. You know, my phone will do the same thing, but gosh, to have it right there. I know what Lisa will say. She'll say, get a rubber band and put your phone on your wrist. Or no, my wife, the duct tape queen, would have me duct tape it to my wrist. But we think that getting more stuff, the new stuff, a nicer, newer house in a different neighborhood, or Desmond, a nice new car. Wanting something that will fulfill us, that will make us satisfied. But what does Solomon say here? He tells us that life feels unsatisfying, even when we have all the new gadgets. Contentment is something that many of us wish we could find. And you know, this isn't something brand new. This isn't something in the 21st century. Some of you remember a song that came out by the Rolling Stones in 1965. I don't, because I was just a baby then. But some of you sang, listened to this on the radio, danced at your prom. The Rolling Stone hit, I Can't Get No Satisfaction. 54 years ago it was going on. But 3,000 years ago, in Solomon's day, it was going on then too. We don't feel we can find satisfaction. That's why Solomon says, I have all the money that I need. I've got palaces. I've got wives. I have concubines. I've got jewelry. I've got money. I've got all of this stuff. But yet I'm still not satisfied. When we don't focus on the right things in life, we're not going to be satisfied. He goes on, number 4, in verse 11, life feels pointless. He says, no one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. I love history. I love studying history, reading about history, watching documentaries and movies on history. How many of you know George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Sam Adams? And I'm not talking about the logger. How many of you have heard of Abraham Lincoln and Teddy Roosevelt? You've never met them, but you know something about them. Now, they and the posterity that they left behind, because of who they were and what they achieved, they are going to be a part of history that most people are going to remember. But do you remember your great-great-grandparents? Can you even tell me your great-great-grandparents' names? Unless you're into genealogy like I am, probably not. Now, that's only a few generations removed. And these people, other than maybe you go to a cemetery and see their name and the dates and the dash between those dates on the stone, you're going to have no idea who they are. That's going to be you and me someday. People are going to forget us. They're not going to remember who we are. Even our own family will forget us. I've got family that wants to forget me now, but I'm not going to let them. I will be a burr under their saddle until the day God calls one of us home. As we look at life, no matter what we do, it's going to be it's pointless. We're going to feel that way. We're going to feel that, yeah, people are going to remember us and what we do. But chances are, they may remember a name, maybe even a picture of you. There's great-great-great-grandpa and great-great-great-grandma. Aside from that, nothing. And if you don't put the names of those people on the back of the pictures, they're not even going to know who they are either. That's a pet peeve of mine in genealogy. No, I'm not going to get off on that. It is easy to see how life can feel pointless knowing that we will be forgotten just a few generations away. Solomon does not stop after he finds the depressing areas of life. Instead, he's a masochist. He keeps searching for more things. So, point number 5 here that I want us to look at is what we learn from Solomon's search. The first thing that Solomon points out later in this chapter that we learn is that we must first realize that something is lost. We got to realize that there is something missing in our lives. The search begins when we realize something is missing. It's when things in our lives don't seem quite right. Something's missing. Something's just not as it should be. When I was preaching at Shenango Christian Church, I remember always, as the minister, I was the last one to leave the building. It wasn't in my contract, but it was understood. I was not only the preacher, but I was also the janitor. And I made sure everything was locked up and picked up. And one day, when I was doing that, I heard a noise. And it was one of our little 3-year-olds just running around back in the fellowship hall. About that time, I heard a frantic knock on the door. And here, a couple that had 4 children, they said it was accidental. But they came back because they miscounted and they forgot one of their kids at the church. It was a bad day for them. And for the husband that was supposed to have the kid in the car, his day got even worse when they got home. But sometimes the things that we know we need to have that are there and familiar to us, when they're gone, sometimes we forget and we don't notice it. So the first thing we have to do is evaluate our lives and find out what's lost, what's different, what's missing. Did I used to have a passion and a love and an excitement in my life and a desire to do things for God, and now I just go through the motions? Or is there really something missing? That's the first thing we have to do, Solomon says, is to realize that something's lost. And secondly, look for what is missing then. Once you realize something's lost, then try to find it. Solomon highlights the fact that all things that are done under the sun are meaningless. In verse 14, there is nothing on earth, listen to that, there's nothing on earth that will satisfy your heart. We're going to become restless if we search on earth for meaning. What Solomon's trying to point out to us is this: the things of this world, the physical things, is meaningless. There's something meaningful, but it's not of this world. It's something more precious than silver, something more costly than gold. And we're going to see what that is here in just a few minutes. Our hearts, thirdly, we learn from Solomon, are restless until we find rest in the Lord. Solomon brings a conclusion to the matter. He says, the whole duty of man is God. Moving back a few chapters, he comes to this conclusion in Ecclesiastes 12:13 when he writes, now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of all mankind. He concludes with that fact. I've looked everywhere. I've experienced everything. I've tried all kinds of stuff to find satisfaction and meaning, and nothing gives me hope. Nothing gives me purpose. The only thing that my purpose is derived from is God and my relationship with Him and my service to Him. As this new series that we're doing titled A Time for All Season points out, there are different seasons in our lives that have us searching. Solomon spent a great deal of his life attaining wealth and knowledge and wives and concubines and countries, and the list goes on and on. He knows what it is like to live in luxury and want for nothing, to lead a life of pleasure. He is similar to many of us, especially the celebrities of today, who have reached stardom and still feel as if there is something missing from their lives. And I tell you what Solomon says here in my interpretation is this: God has created us all with a hole in our hearts, with a shape that nothing else can fill except Him. And you can stuff all kind of stuff in that hole. You can stuff riches and drugs and pornography and alcohol and position and fame, but it's not going to fill it. It's not going to fit right. It's a square peg in a round hole. Solomon tells us that fearing God and obeying His commands is where that purpose comes from. One day God was looking down on earth, and He saw all the evil that was going on. So He decided to send down an angel to come back with a report when it came to the evil in the world and what he found. When the angel returned, she told God, yes, it is bad on earth, 95% bad and 5% good. Well, God thought for a moment, maybe I had better send another angel to get a second opinion on this. So He sends another angel down, and that angel comes back and he says, what'd you find? And the angel said, God, I found the same thing, 95% bad on earth, 5% good. And God said this wasn't a good thing to hear. So He decides that this 5% This doing what should be done needed to be encouraged. So he decided to encourage them by sending all of those good people an email. And do you know what that email said? Oh, so you didn't get the email either. Whatever season of life you're currently in, know that the purpose of life is found not under the sun, but in serving the Son. As our worship team comes, I want you to really look at your life today. I want you to evaluate where you are and where you're going. And I want you to ask yourself, have I found purpose and meaning in my life? Real purpose, satisfaction in my life? And if not, where do I need to look? And from what we saw here, you're not going to find it in earthly things. You're only going to find that peace and that joy, that satisfaction, that purpose in following Jesus. If you have given your life to Christ, but you haven't been following through with it, make the commitment today to start doing so. And you will see your view on life change, your perspective change, the joy in your life increase, and your relationship with God blossom.